and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today I am going to discuss Delhi edition dated 30th April 2018 of The Hindu. So let's begin. The first article that we will discuss today appears on page 1 and it reads, "All villages electrified, says PM Modi." This topic forms a part of GS paper 3 under the heading Energy. So the article says that Prime Minister Modi has announced that all villages in India have been electrified, and he said that the last village to be electrified was Manipur's Senapati district. So with the help of this article, we will try to understand three things today. First, we will understand that which villages are considered as electrified in India, or what according to the government is the metric to say that a village is electrified. Secondly, we will discuss about two important schemes in the energy sector. The first scheme that we'll talk about is the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana, and we will talk about the Pradhan Mantri Sehaj Bijli Har Ghar Yojana or the Saubhagya scheme. These schemes are very important from your UPSC exam point of view because in the past, in prelims exam, questions have been asked on schemes in the energy sector. For example, in prelims 2016, a question was asked about the Uday scheme. So in this respect, we will discuss two more schemes today. Firstly, you should know that the government considers a village as electrified if it has basic electrical infrastructure and 10% of its households and public places have electricity. Here, public places would include places like schools, local administrative offices and health centers. Now we will discuss two schemes in the energy sector which basically aim at facilitating electrification across the country. The first scheme that we'll discuss is the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana. So this scheme was launched in 2014 in order to facilitate 24/7 supply of electricity in the rural areas. The main objectives of this scheme are: first is to provide electrification to all villages. Secondly, it focuses on feeder separation between rural households and farmers. This will basically ensure sufficient power to farmers and regular supply to the other consumers of electricity. Thirdly, it focuses on metering at all levels in rural areas. This metering will help to reduce the losses to the network. And lastly, it focuses on improvement of sub-transmission and distribution network of electricity. As you must be knowing that there are three parts of the power supply value chain, that is generation, transmission and distribution. So DDUGJY focuses on the improvement of sub-transmission and distribution network of electricity. So we have understood two things from this discussion. Firstly, we have understood that the government considers a village is electrified if it has basic electrical infrastructure and 10% of its households and public places have electricity. Next, we have talked about the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana. This scheme was launched in 2014 in order to facilitate 24/7 supply of electricity in the rural areas. The main objectives of this scheme are providing electrification in all villages, feeder separation between rural households and farmers, metering in all the rural areas, and improvement of sub-transmission and distribution network of electricity. So this scheme has played an important role in electrification of villages. Next, we will talk about the Pradhan Mantri Sehaj Bijli Har Ghar Yojana, which is also commonly called as the Saubhagya scheme. So this Saubhagya scheme was launched in 2017. And its main aim is to provide energy access to all through last mile connectivity. It aims to provide electricity connections to unelectrified households in rural and urban areas. And thus, it aims to achieve the government's objective of universal electrification of all households in the country. And under this, the target for the government is to cover 4 crore rural and urban households by March 2019. So I hope you have understood about the Saubhagya scheme as well, that it was launched in 2017 to provide energy access to all through last mile connectivity, and it aims to provide electricity connections to unelectrified households in both rural and urban areas, and thus achieve the government's objective of universal electrification. And its target is to cover 4 crore rural and urban households by March 2019. So both these schemes are important, and from the exam point of view, you should understand what are the main objectives. For example, DDUGJY, the objectives were electrification of rural areas, whereas Saubhagya scheme aims to provide free electricity connections. So DDUGJY was focusing on both transmission and distribution network of electricity, whereas Saubhagya Yojana is only talking about providing free electricity connections. Also, DDUGJY was focused mainly on the rural areas, whereas as we see here, Saubhagya Yojana is focused on both rural as well as urban households. So these are the key points that you should remember from your prelims exam point of view. With this, we will move on to the next article. The next article that we will discuss appears on page 7, and it reads, Nutrition Panel drops Menka proposal. And a related article to this appears on the editorial page as well, and it reads, Food First. This topic forms a part of GS paper 3 under the heading Food Security. And since both these articles talk about nutrition, it is important from the exam point of view because in the past, many questions have been asked pertaining to this. For example, in prelims, a question has been asked saying what are the objectives of National Nutrition Mission. Again, a question has also been asked on the initiative for nutritional security through intensive millets promotion. So basically, this entire topic of nutrition becomes important from the exam point of view. We will discuss what is given in the news, and apart from that, we will talk about the National Council on India's Nutrition, as well as we will discuss about the Poshan Abhiyan. So first we will discuss this article that appears on page 7. Before understanding this, you should know that under the Integrated Child Development Scheme of India, the Anganwadi beneficiaries are entitled to take home rations, and the children between the age group of 3 to 6 years are entitled to have hot cooked meals. And all this is done to improve the nutritional security in the country. However, there has been a debate pertaining to the nutrition guidelines, and different nutrition guidelines have been prepared by Ms. Menka Gandhi and the Women and Child Development Ministry. And as per the guidelines prepared by Ms. Menka Gandhi, she argued in favor of replacing the ready-to-eat food and the take-home dry rations with energy-dense nutrient packets. That is, basically she said that the hot cooked meals and the take-home rations that are provided to the Anganwadi beneficiaries should be removed, and in place of those, energy-dense nutrient packets should be given to the beneficiaries. However, the National Council on Nutrition has rejected the proposal of replacing the hot cooked meals and ready-to-eat food that are provided as rations to the Anganwadi beneficiaries and replacing them by energy-dense nutrient packets that can be mixed with food. And the National Council on Nutrition is not in favor of the factory-made energy-dense nutrient packets. Now, in this respect, we will discuss some key points about this National Council on Nutrition as well, as it is important from your prelims exam point of view. So this National Council on Nutrition has been set up under the Poshan Abhiyan, and it is the apex body to formulate overall policies and monitoring of all nutrition based schemes in the country. The main mandate of this council is to provide policy directions to address India's nutrition challenges through coordinated intersectoral action. That is, it coordinates the actions of all the various nutrition schemes that are running in the country. Second, to coordinate and review the convergence among ministries and to review the programs for nutrition on a quarterly basis. So I hope you have understood some important points. The first thing that we talked about is that the National Council of Nutrition is still in the favor of providing hot cooked meals and ready to eat food to the Anganwadi beneficiaries, and it has rejected the proposal of Ms. Menka Gandhi, who has said that energy dense nutrient packets should be provided to the Anganwadi beneficiaries and they can be mixed with food. In this respect, we have also understood what is the mandate of this National Council on Nutrition. This National Council on Nutrition has been set up under the Poshan Abhiyan, and it is the apex body to formulate overall policies and monitoring of all the nutrition-based schemes that are running in the country. And we have also discussed the mandate of this council, that is to provide policy directions to address India's nutrition challenges, to coordinate and review the convergence among ministries, and to review the programs for nutrition on a quarterly basis. Now we will discuss the editorial that appears on page 8, and with that editorial we will also understand some key points about the Poshan Abhiyan that we just discussed. So the editorial on page 8 also supports the National Council on Nutrition's view. In this respect, the article says that this is important because this will have two benefits. Firstly, it will prevent the commercialization of the nutrition schemes in the country. And secondly, it will not disturb the current nutrition basis of the country. Also, according to this article, the focus of the National Council on Nutrition should be on two particular things, that is, firstly, provide nutritious hot cooked meals and rations with the help of local self-help groups. And secondly, the focus of the National Council of Nutrition should be on building physical infrastructure and funding, as well as closer monitoring of the nutrition mission. So with this discussion, we have understood that what will be the benefits of providing hot cooked meals and take home rations. Firstly, this will prevent the commercialization of the nutrition schemes, and secondly, it will not disturb the current nutrition basis of the country. Also, the article says that the focus of this National Council of Nutrition should be to provide nutritious meals and rations through local self-help groups, and to focus on building physical infrastructure and providing funding. And the last thing that we will talk about in this discussion is about the Poshan Abhiyan. So this Poshan Abhiyan has been launched in 2018 only, and the main target of this Abhiyan is to reduce stunting, undernutrition, anemia and low birth weight by these percentage per annum respectively. Also, the mission targets to bring down stunting among children from 38.4% to 25% by 2022. And how does the mission aim to achieve this target? By ensuring convergence of various nutrition related schemes. So I hope you have understood the key points about the Poshan Abhiyan, which was launched in 2018 with the target of reducing stunting, undernutrition, anemia and low birth weight by these following percentages per annum, and bring down stunting among children from 38.4% to 25% by 2022. And how does this aim to achieve it? Through ensuring convergence of various nutrition related schemes. So with this discussion, we have understood about many key points about the National Council on Nutrition, and we have also understood some key points about the Poshan Abhiyan, and all these are important from your prelims exam point of view. With this, we will move on to the next article. The next two articles that we will discuss appear on page 8. They are Wisdom at Wuhan and Substance and Optics of the Summit. Both these articles talk about the informal summit meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. This topic forms a part of GS paper 2 under the heading India and its Neighborhood Relations. So this article says that the Wuhan summit focused on optics of domestic utility rather than substance. This meeting mainly implied a restart to the negotiating process between India and China. And the main significance of this meeting, according to the author, is firstly, the main aim of this meeting was to ensure the stabilization of relations between India and China. Secondly, in this meeting, both the leaders issued strategic guidance to their respective militaries for enhancing mutual communication on border affairs. Next, this meeting was aimed at implementing confidence-building measures between the two countries. And lastly, the proposed joint economic projects by both these two countries can help to reduce the trust deficit between the two countries. So both these articles mainly talk about the significance of this informal meet between India and China. The significance of this meet was that it helped to ensure stabilization of relations between India and China. In this, both leaders issued strategic guidance to their respective militaries for enhancing mutual communication on border affairs. Also, the meeting was aimed at implementing confidence building measures between both the countries. And lastly, proposed joint economic projects by both these countries in Afghanistan will help to decrease the trust deficit between India and China in South Asia. So this topic forms a part of international relations in the UPSC syllabus, and the students should understand these points from the mains exam point of view. With this, we will move on to the next article. The next important article appears on page 1 and it reads, India-Pakistan to take part in war games. So this article says that a multi-nation counter-terrorism exercise will take place under the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This exercise will take place in Russia and both India and Pakistan will participate in this exercise. The main aim of this counter-terrorism exercise is a peace mission which is aimed at enhancing counter-terror operations among the 8 members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So with the help of this article, we will discuss some key points about SCO, and I have talked about this in one of the earlier DNS videos. So let us revise it from there. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This will form a part of GS Paper 2 under the subheading Important International Institutions, Agencies, their structure and mandate. So the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or SCO is a permanent intergovernmental international organization. It was constituted in 2001 in Shanghai, China by 6 countries, namely the Republic of Kazakhstan, People's Republic of China, the Kyrgyz Republic, the Russian Federation, Republic of Tajikistan and Republic of Uzbekistan. In 2017, a meeting of SCO was held in Astana, Kazakhstan, and in this meeting, India and Pakistan were granted a status of full member of SCO. So as of now, a total of 8 countries are members of the SCO. The first 6 countries are these, and India and Pakistan are the new member countries. So till now we have understood that SCO is a permanent intergovernmental international organization which was constituted in 2001 in Shanghai by these 6 countries. In 2017, in a meeting of SCO, India and Pakistan were granted full membership status in SCO. Now let's discuss what are the main goals of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The main goals of SCO are strengthening mutual trust among the member states, promoting cooperation in politics, trade, economy, technology and culture, as well as in education, energy, transport, tourism and environmental protection. It also aims at making joint efforts to maintain and ensure peace, security and stability in the region, and it also aims at moving towards the establishment of a democratic, fair and rational new international political and economic order. Apart from this, we should also know that SCO has 2 permanent bodies. First is the SCO Secretariat, which is based in Beijing, and the second is the Executive Committee of the Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure, also called as RATS, and this is headquartered in Tashkent. Lastly, you should know that apart from the 8 member countries of SCO, it has 4 observer states and 6 dialogue partners as well. So with the help of this, we have understood about the main goals of SCO. We have understood about the 2 permanent bodies of SCO, that is its secretariat and the Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure or RATS, which is headquartered in Tashkent. And we have also understood about the membership of SCO, that is it has 8 member countries, 4 observer countries and 6 dialogue partner countries. Since India became a member of SCO in 2017 itself, that is why this international organization is very important from your upcoming prelims exam, and you should know all these key points. With this, we will move on to the next article. The next article that we will discuss appears on page 9 and it reads People as Auditors. This article talks about social audits and it forms a part of GS paper 2 under the heading Transparency and Accountability and Institutional Measures under Important Aspects of Governance. Also, a related question to this topic has been asked in Mains 2016 exam as well, which said effectiveness of the government system at various levels and people's participation in the governance system are interdependent. Discuss their relationship in the context of India. So this article talks about social audit as an effective tool of accountability. It talks about the evolution of the social audit process, the weaknesses in the current social audit architecture, and also provides suggestions to improve social audit in the country. So let us first discuss the evolution of social audit in India. The article says that social audit can become a powerful democratic method by which transparency can be combined with an institutional form of accountability for the people of the country. Basically, under social audit, information is shared among people so that they can undertake a performance audit of a service or a program from the planning stage to the implementation and evaluation stage. However, this social audit will not give effective results unless it is backed by legal and institutional structure. So the article gives an example about the evolution of social audit. It says that in mid-1990, Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan or MKSS started conducting village-based Jan Sunwais or public hearings, and these public hearings held discussions on developmental expenditure, and it was MKSS that paved the way for the RTI Act, which empowered the public to institutionalize social audits. Also, during these village-based public hearings, people realized that information is at the core of their empowerment. And as a result of this, people demanded full and open access to these records of development expenditure, and they demanded for mandatory social audits. And this is the main theme of this article, that is how social audits play an important role in ensuring citizen-centric accountability. So I hope you have understood a few key points about social audit from here, that social audit is a powerful democratic method by which transparency can be combined with an institutional form of accountability for the people. Under social audit, information is shared among people, and on the basis of that, they take a performance audit of a service or a program from the planning stage to the implementation and evaluation stage. However, it will be effective only if it is backed by legal and institutional structure. An example given in this respect is the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, which started village-based public hearings on developmental expenditure undertaken in the villages, and it was this MKSS that paved the way for RTI Act, which empowered the public to institutionalize social audits. Also, at the core of this citizen empowerment lies the role of information, and hence people under MKSS demanded full and open access to information about this developmental expenditure, and they also demanded mandatory social audits. And finally, after the RTI Act came into being, citizens started having access to the government records. Now, there are also certain weaknesses associated with this process of social audit. The weakness is that even though RTI Act has come into being, still availability of just information is not enough. Even though information is available, yet grievances have not been redressed effectively. Hence, the suggestion provided in the article to improve upon this weakness is that this information should be accompanied with accountability as well. And this will prove as an effective tool to hold the government answerable and accountable. We will also discuss what has been done till now in the social audit process in the country. Firstly, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act or MGNREGA was the first law to mandate social audit as a statutory requirement. And in 2011, the Office of CAG developed social audit rules for MGNREGA. It conducted a performance audit in 2015 And finally, it formulated social audit standards in consultation with the Ministry of Rural Development. Secondly, in various states, social audits have been effectively institutionalized. These states are Andhra Pradesh, Sikkim, Tamil Nadu and Jharkhand. Also, in 2017, Meghalaya became the first state to roll out a social audit law to cover all its departments. So in the first part, we understood about the evolution of social audit process in the country. However, we also talked about the fact that there are certain weaknesses also in the social audit process. The main weakness is that even though information is available, still grievances have not been redressed effectively. And in order to deal with this weakness, the suggestion provided in the article is that information should be accompanied with accountability as well. The article also talks about what has been done for social audit in the country till now. Firstly, MGNREGA was the first to mandate social audit as a statutory requirement, and in 2016, social audit standards were created for this act by the Office of CAG. Also, social audits have been institutionalized in states like Andhra Pradesh, Sikkim, Tamil Nadu and Jharkhand, and in 2017, Meghalaya became the first state to pass social audit law to cover all departments. So the main gist of this entire article is that the system of social audit needs a collaborative effort of all parts of the government, and it also needs a push by multiple authorities so that an institutionalized framework for social audit can be created in the country. This article is important from your mains exam point of view. With this, we come to an end to today's newspaper discussion. Now let's move on to question for the day.